Greetings and salutations, people of the internet. Austin here. Last time I started off the potential beginning of a new video series on the channel with the first fakemon special. I combined two of my favorite video game franchises as I turned the horsemen from Darksiders into a legendary Pokemon quartet. Y'all managed to hit the like goal, so this will be an ongoing series on the channel. I have a lot more in store for y'all, so be sure to subscribe to see more in the future. As I said in the last video and in the oh-so-subtle title and thumbnail, we're going back in time as I roast the hell out of the original version of my second ever fakemon region, the Texken Region. Because there is nothing scarier than looking at your early work, that's why I'm doing this in October. Totally not stalling to finish other things up. No siree Bob. This is only moderately less terrible than the OG Sendine region, but we still have some stinkers here. Two things to take into account before we go into this. One, there is no rhyme or reason to this dex layout here. I just did stuff as I felt like it back then. And number two, the sound type does not exist yet in this version of the region, so a lot of Pokemon from the reboot are missing and or have different types. So, grab some snacks and get ready for some pain as I roast the original designs of the Texken region all the way back from 2021. God, I'm getting old. Plantap, the biofuel Pokemon. Oh, I didn't fathom how bad this design was when put up against the redraw from the reboot. You'll be hearing a lot of variations of that throughout this entire video. Get used to it now. The lack of a visible eye on the left side of the face is easily the biggest fumble outside of the terrible render and line work, but that's generally every Pokemon in this version of the region. The tail is way too long, and the overall design is just way too detailed and busy for a first stage starter. Those legs especially really hurt to look at now. Thankfully, the foundation for all the starters are good. Bow Vehicle, the biofuel Pokemon. I think every middle stage this time around is fucking ugly. Once again, the proportions are way out of whack. The legs and tail are too long, and the torso is way too big for this Pokemon. I went too hard on the car theme with the patterns on the side of the body. Had to cut a lot of that out on the second pass down the line. There's also way too much silver in the color palette. The brown really got lost in the shuffle quickly. The shiny is also an eyesore. The yellow and green are just puke-worthy. The blue was alright, all things considered. I definitely needed to change the brown to silver like I did in the reboot. Steerthanol, the fertilizer engine Pokemon. The most over-designed, but least awful of the line. A lot of the patterns needed to be toned down since there is so much going on here. Once again, the legs are too long and are a touch too skinny. Tail is a touch too long once again and did not need nearly as much segmentation. The colors are an absolute mess. Way too many shades of green, and I needed to keep the brown as part of the color scheme. The door is way too direct. The handle needed to go ASAP. Lastly, the vines around the horns and exhaust ports needed to go, as they really cluttered the design up too much. Of the three original starters, this one was the best, so take that one as you will. Full Air, the Pouch Pony Pokemon. The least awful of the based starters, this doesn't have too many major issues holding it back. The legs are a touch too skinny, mainly needing some bulk near the calves and hooves. The stomach needed a little bit more definition. The eyes definitely needed to change since all three starters here have the exact same pupil and eye shape. Lastly, I needed to make the tail a bit wider overall. The red of the shiny was too muted, should have pumped up the volume on that one. not bad, all things considered. This will be the most positive I get when talking about the rest of the starters from here on out. Polrier, the Pouch Pony Pokemon. This is tied for the worst middle starter with Bevolt. I don't know what's worse, the face or the legs. They're both pretty shit. The leg perspective and proportions don't work in the slightest. The yellow is too dull to work as an accent color. The fire mane is way too busy, so I needed to simplify the shapes there a lot more. The pouch looks terrible! Like I super glued it to the side of the body. The smoke cloud pattern looks tacked on, and just the absolute failure of the face perspective. The flame at the bottom of the tail just looks bad. No sugarcoating that. So in the reboot, I had to cut that down to just the base of the tail. That shiny is an abject failure, so I had to completely redo it later on. Eruptang, the Pyro Courier Pokemon. The pose is the best thing about this version of the design, but sadly it didn't work out in the second pass in the reboot. The pouches and the saddle are the worst part about this design easily. No doubt in my mind there. The mud splatter pattern, say that 5 times fast, on the legs are just too busy and take up too much space on the body. The tail sucks, easily the third worst thing about this. The main hat just looks awkward as hell. Once again, the smoke cloud pattern on the body just looks half-baked. Another unintentional pun. The shiny isn't complete garbage, but it's still pretty bad. Aquaster, the kinetic Pokemon. The second to least awful base starter. This needed a few more passes to get where it needed to be. The eyes and the feet are the things that needed the biggest changes. Having variety in the facial features amongst the starters would have been a much appreciated feature back then. The feet are just too boring and they don't fit in with the rest of the rounded shape language and with the rest of the design. The yellow is too dull and isn't in the color scheme enough. Pose needed some work, too plain for what is supposed to be a cute little man's. Proportions are what killed this design. And the lack of talent back then. The shinies across the board for this entire line are actually solid. Give or take some saturation levels. Bevolt, the kinetic Pokemon. You know what? I changed my mind. This is the worst middle stage. I hate everything about this variation of the design. The tail looks like ass and is way too long. The proportions and line work are unwashed booty cheeks. The face is just awful. No redeeming features there. The color balance is all over the place. Way too much black overall, so the blue gets lost in the shuffle. The arms look awkward and the feet are just too small for the body. Get this shit off my screen. Capcurrent, the River Channel Pokemon. The worst final starter of the trio? Not even a contest. Oh, where do I even begin with the multitude of failures in this design? The tail. That fucking tail. It is so bad. Way too long for this body. And the perspective is just awful. The hat is way too artificial, especially with the lightning bolt section. Same with the shoulders for that matter. The personality is too basic, the face isn't interesting, and those damn feet are nowhere near the same size they should be. There isn't enough contrast between the blues and the color palette, and I'm actually getting angry looking at this Pokemon. Be gone, you mid-ass beaver. A Rat Kid, the playful pest Pokemon. Honestly, this one isn't that bad. Only needing at least one more pass to fix things up. The legs are a little too barren design-wise, the stinger's too small, and the eyes needed to be their own color. Outside of some minor proportion changes on the torso, that's pretty much it. Alas, I didn't do that the first time, but I'm actually pretty happy with this little bugger, pun intended naturally. So it wasn't that bad. Bravo! Molteen, the introvert Pokemon. Again, not that bad. The perspective of the head and the shape of the pincers of the cocoon are the only major issues with this design. The colors also need a touch-up. They don't feel like a Pokemon hiding in the shell of its previous evolution. The mouth opening for the eyes is also a touch too big in hindsight. One of the things I changed in the redesign years later. Like with the Rat Kid, I'm not angry looking at this one, but not to the same extent, mind you. Sorry these two entries were kind of short. I will definitely have more to say with the final evolution. Scorpectolt, the Phantom Stinger Pokemon. Yeah, this is way too evil looking in hindsight. I can cut myself on the edge just looking at this Pokemon now. It is way too cramped together with not nearly enough breathing room to show off the entire design. I don't think there's enough color contrast. This thing is just so damn busy overall. I definitely overdid it when it came to the wispy spectral shapes on the pincers and legs, making the red ectoplasm sections feel less impactful by default. The eyes on the stinger are just unnecessary with this design. Don't even get me started on that mid-ass shiny. So many rendering mistakes with this one. Move on, please, for my sake, future me. The music, the entertainer Pokemon. This is trash. No ifs, ands, or buts. I hate this design. This doesn't feel like a singer. It feels like it just told a bad joke at an open mic night and is waiting for people to laugh. They never will. The proportions, ass. The colors, ass. The pose, not the worst, but the expression murders any promise it had. The actual physical mic was a terrible decision on my part back then. It doesn't look natural in the slightest. This is the worst design in the original version of this region. No contest. Get this garbage away from me. Rocking Bird, the performer Pokemon. It's better than its Prevo, but so is dental work without numbing agent. Once again, the microphone was a terrible idea, but it being stuck to a branch makes it a touch less egregious. The Pompadour-esque hair and the music note tie are still clever in my opinion, something I'm glad I kept in the redesign. But that's where the positivity ends. The legs are too skinny, and the placement gives this Pokemon no sense of balance. The colors are dull and lifeless, unbefitting of a good musician. The shiny is also mid as fuck. A step up, but not a big one. Cowalope, the timid Pokemon. Another one that's not too bad. I'd actually call it okay. The biggest thing holding this one back are some of the proportions. The lack of a more distinct silhouette, mainly in the cheeks. The ears also do feel a bit lacking in the shape department, and the horns needed to be sticking up straight for a more striking visual. Aside from that, this is a solid little bun. Gravelope, the courageous Pokemon. Okay, I don't hate this version of the design, but I'm a lot less positive with it than I was with Cowalope. The proportions are pretty basic, all things considered, mainly in the arms, I think. The horns are boring, and I don't think the shape does it any favors. The same complaint being levied against the face. The colors also leave something to be desired. Granted, to be fair, this changed types in the reboot, so the colors here aren't bad by any means. I just prefer the color palette of the redesign more. This is a solid B-. Darkcub, the tiny terror Pokemon. Mid. Can't mince worse about it. This discount, scruffy, dumpster diver Teddy Ursa ass bear. This is so fucking boring. Outside of the pose, is just as basic as you can get for a Dark-type bear. There isn't even that much to talk about, as this isn't even terrible. It's just dull. The shiny was good for its time, however. I can't hate on it, even if I didn't keep it for the reboot. Berserk, the Titanic Terror Pokemon. Only mildly more interesting than its Prevo, but still vastly inferior to the rebooted design. It's just a giant-ass cartoon bear with some scar patterns and fairly unique colors. The pose is still boring, only bearing a tiny hint of menace with the slightly tilted head. I should have used more of the gray accents on this design, probably for the muzzle if I wanted to be lazy at the moment in time. The shiny isn't nearly as good as Dark Cubs, I'm afraid. Moving on. Texken Region, the fox Pokemon. The mouth and the pose are the worst parts about this design. The back leg looks awkward since I tried to play middleman with the classic pose and the new one with the slightly lowered leg, but it just looks terrible. The smile looks creepy for some reason, and the face is too crowded with the freckles on the side. The silhouette is too mundane, and the colors need to be pushed further. It's not awful, but I definitely did not do enough with this design. Texken Region, the fox Pokemon. This one isn't as bad, with only the colors not being pushed enough for more contrast being the biggest issue with this version of the design. Oh, since I don't have a whole lot to say with this entry, and I forgot to mention it with Nickit, the shinies are lame. I tried to make them look like their Galarian counterparts, but it just looks terrible this time around. Thank God the rebooted ones actually got some good shinies. Surspring, the coiled snake Pokemon. The pose is the weakest aspect of this Pokemon. It's too static, and it doesn't imply the danger this bouncy noodle really is. I needed to have it curl up more along the bottom for a stronger bounce and the illusion of momentum. The colors and proportions are solid this time around. It just needed another pass. Oh, the blue on the shiny needed to go. It does not work nearly as well as I wanted to with the rest of that color scheme. Big sad. Gatherwing, the collective Pokemon. The base stage of this Pokemon is actually pretty damn good. Only needing one more pass to fix the proportions and the flow of the overall pose. But the colors, design, and the expression really work here. The colony form, on the other hand, this is hot garbage. It's way too busy, way too lumpy, and too uneven to work as a collective form / scare tactic. It has no sense of balance or flow, way too many visible eyes, and the color balance is severely out of whack. The glow down from the base to the colony form needs to be studied. Opassel, the astral vermin Pokemon. Not terrible in the classic sense, but just not pushed far enough. The colors are too plain and don't convey the ghost type well enough in my opinion, staying too close to a normal type purely. The soul hovering over the body is too small and it doesn't feel like the focal point of the design. The tail is too clean for something based on an opossum. I should have added some segmentation there. Probably one of the better designs in this and in the rebooted versions of the region. Solid B. Asperpillar, the spiked fur Pokemon. Again, not a bad design, just need to be pushed a teeny bit further. Weird to have two of those back to back. Anyway, this version of the design shows up way too much of its actual head. I needed to cover that up a bit more since it feels a little too exposed. The legs also aren't great. Probably the second weakest part of this design. It's the angle of the spikes. They just feel a tad off. The weakest part of the design is the stripe on the back. It just feels weird as it is. I would have been better off with just having it take up more space for simplicity, which is what I did later on in the reboot. Spikecoon, the barb shell Pokemon. Outside of fixing the line work, shading, and the eye colors, this design's actually perfect. Legit, I didn't have to really change anything going from this to the reboot, so mark this down as one of the few good designs from this version of the region. Good job, Past Me, you didn't fuck up! Foxifer, the Poison Pelt Pokemon. Okay, this one isn't as good as Spikecoon, but the number of changes needed for this version of the design isn't too bad. The shape and color of the wings are boring. Not intimidating enough for a Pokemon trying to scare off admittingly dumber predators. The legs are too long and the shape of them doesn't work for a Pokemon this chonky. Lastly, this needed a visible thorax under the massive poisonous floof just to break things up a little bit. On paper, that sounds like a lot, but compared to the other Pokemon of this region, this got off lightly. Blobass, the Glutton Guild Pokemon. This is just a fucking fish with chubby cheeks. I dropped the ball hard with the original design here. It just sucks. The proportion sucks, the perspective is all over the place, and there is no emotion or personality in this design at all. Don't even get me started on the piss yellow shiny. This is one of the worst designs in the whole region. Might even be the worst. Well, we'll see on that one. There's a lot of region left. Sharbage, the Omnivore Pokemon. While better than Blobass, not much of a statement there. This is still undercooked. The colors and the proportions are boring. The shiny sucks. And I don't think the garbage truck theme comes across at all, sadly. Plus, I don't think there's enough overlap between the stages. I know that doesn't have to be the case with all Pokemon, but I just don't feel like they belong as part of the same evolutionary line. Turtle, the Fortune Teller Pokemon. This isn't too bad, but the proportions are boring. Once again, I played this way too safely, even for such a basic concept. The legs being straight on tubes were the worst decision I made of the entire design. They just look so bad. But the crystal ball is probably the most disappointing aspect of this version, since it's way too subdued to be the focal point of the design and for the entire evolutionary line. Thankfully, the redesign will be a fairly simple fix down the line. Fortunus, the Fortune Teller Pokemon. Oh, the perspective on this Pokemon is terrible. Nothing about that shell makes sense from that angle. The color balance is so atrocious. No real sense of contrast in this palette. I overused the ring pattern on this design, so there's no variation there, sadly. God, the render on this one's particularly bad. Just get this off my screen. Torteller, the Premonition Pokemon. This Pokemon is somehow too busy and too plain at the exact same time. I don't know how I managed that. Let's get the big thing out of the way first. The perspective on the body and shell do not match, and it looks like shit as a result. The bandana is way too detailed and clutters the face, but the rest of the torso isn't eye-catching enough, even with the crystal ball on the chest. Once again, the color contrast wasn't pushed far enough, and it feels very flat as a result. I also went way too far on the Romani fortune teller stereotypes at the time, so that is 100% my bad back then. I have since learned my lesson with this kind of crap. Lastana, the Flower Umbrella Pokemon. Timu Floette looking ass. This design is fun on paper, but boring in execution. The face doesn't have enough personality, the pose is mid at best, and the colors could have used some work. The leaf hair is easily the worst part of the design. It just looks bad. There's a very good reason I redesigned this Pokemon damn near completely in the reboot into Bonitox. The shiny also needed work. The leaf-haired should have been its own separate color. Lantoxa, the Poison Bell Pokemon. This wasn't nearly as bad, thankfully, only needing one more pass to iron out the few kinks. The proportions needed some work, not enough contrast there. The berries should have been a touch smaller, they feel a bit too big on this design. Lastly, she needed more of a visible personality. She feels too mundane for such a snooty diva. I don't love the shiny on this one. Glad I scrapped that in the reboot. Texken Ekans, the snake Pokemon. This isn't terrible as a whole, but this is a prime example of a bad rock type just slapping rocks on the Pokemon and calling it a day. The purple needed to be brighter to work more here as an accent color. The mustache is a touch too small, but the rocks on the head and tail are easily the weakest parts of the design. The rocks on the head needed to be scrapped ASAP, and the tail shapes needed to be reworked, removing a lot of details. Still, overall, it's a good concept. Texken Arbok, the Cobra Pokemon. Speaking of too many details, dear Arceus, this is over-designed. The hat and tail are way too busy, both in detail and in color, for its own damn good. Oh god, I forgot about the rock goatee. It looks terrible as it is, and there's a reason I got rid of the rocks and just had the hood become the hat in the reboot. To be fair to myself, though, this was my first ever regional variant before I even properly started work on the Sindine region, but this still blows. That's not changing. Hintharno, the Blaze Antenna Pokemon. The legs on this Pokemon are just so fucking bad, it's insane. The torso is also just a touch too long. The canisters on the back need to be a wee bit bigger. And this Pokemon does not need 3 sets of legs. Not to mention, the feet are in the completely wrong position to help this Pokemon actually stand up properly. The flamethrower antenna weren't pushed far enough. Shocker, I know. And the flame render looks like shit. Don't even get me started on the radioactive piss shiny. Coyote, the Snow Pup Pokemon. It's sad that both versions of this design are chalked in different ways. The line work on this version is trash. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The back legs and tail are too skinny, and the shape of the paws just look off. The proportions are out of whack, and the head being a touch too small. The lack of a more visible personality hurts as well. I want to tear the shading a new asshole, but that's beating a dead horse at this point. Psyotice, the Mental Howl Pokemon. Over-complicated. Holy shit, this is too damn busy for its own good. The ice covering the tail, neck, and legs are so unnecessary. The color contrast isn't there at all right now. The pale red is doing nothing for this design. The basic angry expression doesn't do enough for this Pokemon's personality. That shiny is complete and utter ass, and I am so glad I changed it in the reboot. Rootfurus, the Brawling Brat Pokemon. This one, by contrast, isn't too bad. Just needing some minor proportion work to nail down this design. The legs are a touch too long in the head, and specifically the eyes are too small. The red accents could have also been made a bit darker for more visible contrast. I swear, if y'all did a shot every time I say the word contrast in one of these videos, you would be a corpse 3 times over. Bowlings, the Mountain Cat Pokemon, and all the goodwill from the Prevo is gone more or less here, as this needed a lot of work. The face is the biggest fumble here. The eyes are too small and the rings around them just look awful. There is no discernible personality to be found in that expression. The dark brown doesn't do jack shit for this design, the main reason I ended up swapping to black in the reboot. The red doesn't stand out enough again. The mountain back wasn't pushed far enough, and the pose overall needed a few more passes to get the anatomy down correct. This is far from the worst in the region by a long shot, but it is still far from good. Adaptogil, the versatile Pokemon. Okay, the changes needed for this one were actually fairly simple in hindsight. The lips needed to protrude more for a better silhouette, the main fin needed a bit more depth 3D, and just to cut down a number of smaller fins underneath the body. Oh, also, bigger eyes would have gone a long way in this design, as I can attest to with the redesign. Not a whole lot of changes needed. Just annoyed I didn't see the issues back then, but that's the point of growth, I suppose. Gardaptfin, the Aqua Apex Pokemon. The biggest changes needed to this one were to push the shapes further with this design. The head and fins aren't creating a dynamic enough silhouette to feel like an apex predator. I needed to move the tiny fin on the bottom and make the gills a whole lot thicker. The tail fin itself could have been wider as well to help it feel more powerful overall. Like with the Prevo, this isn't terrible, but the design is just kind of bare bones. Raitama, the Volt Roller Pokemon. This one just needed more chonk and smaller arms to be good. I'd say this is probably one of the most successful designs in this version of the region. The tail is definitely too long on a second look, however. I had to cut that down way later down the road. A few minor changes here and there would have done wonders for this guy back then. If this wasn't apparent beforehand, a lot of these entries are going to be pretty short, relatively speaking. Texken Tangela, the Tumbleweed Pokemon. Outside of better color contrast, I say this design is more or less perfect for what I wanted to do with this regional variant. The red on the shiny is a bit too bright in hindsight, however, but yeah, no major notes this time. Moving on. Texken Tangrowth, the Tumbleweed Pokemon. Second burst, same as the first. Better color contrast was the main thing needing to really fix this version of the design. Though some of the root placement and perspective could have used one more pass, admittingly, but that's kind of a nitpick. The last two were among the best designs in the first pass of this region. Tankferno, the Bushfire Pokemon. I want to make something clear with this Pokemon in relation to my last sentence. I love this design. This is one of my favorite regional evolutions, period. But I don't love the proportions of this version of the design. It's too close in body plan to Tangrowth, and the tiered colors on the torso sadly just look terrible. The basic concept and color palette? Peak. But the execution here wasn't nearly as good as it needed to be. I'm sorry I had to roast you so badly, buddy. Oh, that shiny is just hot garbage. But that's what I get for just hue shifting it and calling it a day. Pamperlot, the Spoiled Trickster Pokemon. One of the handful of new evolutions introduced in this version of the region, and this is easily the second worst one. We'll get to the worst one way later. The colors weren't pushed nearly far enough, the pose is basic, and I don't think it resembles Purloin enough. Ironically, I think this version has the better face of the two versions of this Pokemon. I kind of chalked the face up in the rebooted version, not gonna lie. These spots are way too busy and too plentiful, so it just kind of muddies this design. Still, it's a fun idea, but it's mid as fuck in execution. Welcaneer, the Spark Shell Pokemon. Overall, a very successful design, but the only minor issues plaguing this design come down to proportions. The big one being the bottom of this Pokemon. It's just way too big for the vibes I want. The shell is also a touch too detailed and comes off as cluttered as a result. The pink accents also needed a bit more contrast. They blend in a little bit too much with the existing palette. Coruscant, the Lightning Toxin Pokemon. Ironically, the bottom of this Pokemon is too small for this design. I also feel like this has way too many similar colors, so the palette really doesn't pop outside of the shell and hat. The sword/harpoon is too small and is at the wrong angle to feel threatening. Also, that shiny is just complete buns. Overall, it's one of the better lines of this trash heap of an early region. Speaking of trash... Trash Hog, the dumpster diver Pokemon. This little piggy is way too skinny for the vibe of this line, especially in the legs. Said legs are also way too long for a first stage piggy, so I should have shrunk them down by a lot. The tail's too long and too skinny once again, and the silver at the end of the fur doesn't line up with how I colored the rest of the Pokemon, so that should have been gone. The snout is also a touch too big, and a little tooth would have gone a long way to make this Pokemon feel more adorable. To sum everything up, it's not enough of a chonky baby. Borsura, the dumpster diver Pokemon. Oh boy, this one is trash, pun intended. The leg perspective and positioning is all over the place, and it looks terrible. The head to body ratio is off big time. The tail is once again too long for the design. The trash around the mouth isn't bright enough to work as a focal point of the design. There is a complete lack of contrast there. This design just sucks as it was back then. Especially with that shiny. What even was I thinking? Texken Quillfish, the balloon Pokemon. This is way too busy and the colors just make me mad looking at them. The stripe around the torso leading into the tail was a terrible idea, and the color choice for the ectoplasmic spikes was just awful. I should have pushed the shape of the tail more to make the skull imagery stronger. As mid as this is, the evolution is worse in every regard. The shiny's alright though. Quillecto, the phantom balloon Pokemon. I hate you. I hate everything about you. The red patterns across the body cluttered the fuck out of this design so badly. The flailed tail doesn't work at all for a fish Pokemon, sadly, and it just looks awkward in hindsight. The stripe around the torso and tail looks even worse here, and that's just inexcusable. The fins on the side just muddy the design, like everything with this design, frankly. Lastly, if I was gonna give it chubby cheeks, I should have gone full throttle there. The redesign was so fucking necessary, I could scream. Roadroller, the electric skater Pokemon. The pose is so damn boring. I'm falling asleep looking at it. The shins and feet are too small, the tail is a wee bit too long, and the render on the electricity just looks like complete ass. The brown also wasn't a good choice for this color scheme. It doesn't add anything. Granted, this is in hindsight since I ended up changing the typing in the reboot, so I suppose that's a little bit of a nitpick. The shiny still sucks, that hasn't changed at all though. Texken Durant, the trickster ant Pokemon. Outside the legs being too small, there isn't anything really wrong with this design as a bug dark type. When I eventually changed it to Bug Dragon, then things really had to change. I will say though, the yellow spots on the back kinda cluttered this design, so those could have been cut earlier on, admittingly. The stinger also could have been a touch longer as well, but that's a nitpick. This is an entirely serviceable design. Texken Heatmore, the Anteater Pokemon. Much like its rival and counterpart, there isn't anything majorly wrong with this version of the design, it's just not pushed far enough to be called great. A more interesting pose and a bigger volcano tail are the only major things needed to make this regional variant peak. And the better shiny. This one sucks. Dipotokick, the kickoff rat Pokemon. Oh, the idea is so fun, but the execution is even less than mid. The face is the worst part of this design by a long shot. It just looks terrible. Speaking of the head, it is way too big for this Pokemon and the tail is too skinny, especially at the end to act as a proper counterbalance. The leg anatomy is so off, it's hilarious. Lastly, the color scheme is lacking in real contrast. God, you're disappointing. Goten, the voracious Pokemon. Alright, this isn't terrible, but the proportions and anatomy are weak sauce. This needed an actual neck, a smaller tail, more defined legs, and a definitely more defined face. The lower legs in particular needed to be thicker as they went down to make for a more interesting silhouette. I don't hate this version of the design, it's a lovable little derp child, but that doesn't make it good. Texken Region, the snapping Pokemon. Legitimately, a perfect design outside of the white claws on the feet. I'm not joking, I have no issues with the base design whatsoever. I actually just had to redraw this Pokemon for the reboot. That's how good this design is. The shiny does suck, however, as do most of them in this region, frankly. Texken Dreadnought, the bite Pokemon. I didn't need a lot of fixes for this Pokemon in hindsight. I only should have tweaked the colors, removed some of the details across the board, and shrank the spike at the end of the tail. And a few more proportion changes, and a better shiny once again, and this Pokemon could have been golden from jump. Well, I hope you enjoyed the mild positivity. Time to tear the final evolution a new asshole. Terrasnap, the Chomp Pokemon. Where do I even begin with this Pokemon? The pose and perspective are terrible. I did way too many profile views in my early days. It is entirely too busy thanks to the countless details across the body and the overly complicated neck design. The leg positioning makes no sense once again, so it looks awful. The perspective on the tail spikes are laughable, and the shell is just mid. The color scheme isn't terrible, but it needed some tweaking. Lastly, this has the worst shiny in the entire region. This radioactive, piss-ass shiny hurts my eyes just looking at it. Get this trash off my screen. Frostier, the Ice Antler Pokemon. The proportions overall here are a mess, mainly in the legs and the antlers. The legs are too skinny and too long for their own good. The shins and hooves needing a bit more bulk. The head needed to be a bit bigger, but the main issue is the antlers. The bottom just looks terrible. Having the tips being covered by ice just doesn't work out, sadly. Needed to scrap that idea and make them more of a solid shape with proper bulk. Moose Snow, the Ice Antler Pokemon. The Ice Antlers, once again, was a terrible idea, even if it does look better than Frostier's antlers. This needed some proper big ol' antlers just with some ice on top. The lower legs are also on the smaller size, so sizing them up would have given this Pokemon some much needed bulk for the unit that is a moose. The snow pattern also needed to be bigger for easier visual clarity. That shiny is just buns. The green does not work at all. Arena Cone, the Spine Bud Pokemon. This isn't bad on a second look, only needing some tweaks to the perspective and the pine cone on the back. Said pine cone is a touch too small and needed to be shrunk down. Making this a 3/4 view would have really been simple, but for some reason I was too dumb to do so back then. I don't care for the shinies or this line. I just hue shifted them both and they're mid as the result. Cactipine, the Spine Bud Pokemon. Way too many spikes for its own good with this Pokemon. Simplicity would have been so much better. The feet look like shit, the sense of balance just isn't there, Chief, and don't make any sense perspective-wise. Bright pink isn't terrible, but I don't like it in hindsight and removed it in the reboot for a better contrast color. Same thing for the yellow accent, sadly. Texken Grimer, the Sludge Pokemon. On paper, there is nothing wrong with this line as a whole whatsoever. They do their job wonderfully, but I will say these versions of this original variant were both missing something to make them a tad more unique. As they are in this pass, they're serviceable. Maybe the main body could have been a bit darker, but that's more of a nitpick than anything. While I prefer the extra things added to the rebooted versions, these two are fine. Texken Muck, the Sludge Pokemon. Again, just like with its pre-evolution, there isn't anything wrong with this version of the design. The colors pop, the flames give it more of a distinct look, even if they could have been rendered a whole lot better. I will say, I think I could have smoothed out a few of the sections for a cleaner look. I will say, the shiny slap on both stages of this line. Mwah! Spylucinate, the Illusion Venom Pokemon. The legs look terrible, let's just get that out of the way first with this design. They look like broken chopsticks glued together, and are hoping they don't break under the weight of this Pokemon. The proportions aren't that interesting, the mushroom should have been a lot bigger, and the eyes, while fun, are way too busy for this color scheme. The pedipalps really don't add anything to this version of the design, sadly, one of the main reasons I dropped them later on in the reboot. Narpoon, the Ice Cracker Pokemon. Outside of the Harpoon Horn not being 3D enough and having too many spots on the pattern, this isn't bad at all. Could this have been pushed way further? Absolutely. But for what this Pokemon is and what I wanted to do at the time with my limited skills, this is serviceable. I will say, though, the shiny sucks. Not a Garchomp level bad, mind you, but still pretty mid. Lutor, the Burglar Pokemon. This discount Care Bear looking ass Pokemon is disappointing, even if the color scheme kind of slaps. Let's speed through this one. I'm tired. The legs are way too big for a first stage Pokemon, making it look more like a middle stage. The hands don't work at all for a raccoon, lacking their clever little hands. If you get that reference, you had a good childhood. The tail is too small and plain to make for a good silhouette. Lastly, the head is too small for this body, leading into the middle stage accusations. The shiny is decent, but the main shade of green is off. Bracoon, the Master Thief Pokemon. Honestly, outside of the mask / eyes and the overall shape of the tail, this Pokemon's actually good. The tail is too busy with the tiered look it has going on now. That needed to be streamlined massively. The mask is too small for the face, not feeling enough like a proper burglar. The colors are also a touch off, needing a little bit more variation. Aside from the shiny being kinda ass with the current color scheme, I am still very happy looking back at this version of this Pokemon, despite everything I've just nitpicked about in this breakdown. Manowire, the Ice Current Pokemon. The ice on the top of the head didn't work nearly as well as I wanted it to, looking way too tacked on for my liking. The face and lower body is also a touch too wide to have some good contrast with the top of the head. But the worst part is easily the ice-covered tentacles. Like with the head, the ice looks tacked on here and ruins the flow of the design. Not helped at all by this lame-ass pose. The prongs at the end of the main tentacles are also too small to work properly as a focal point to the design. Texken Sandygast, the Rock Pile Pokemon. Back when this was still a regional variant before convergent Pokemon were even introduced in Scarlet and Violet. The basic design is still more or less the same, but this version has way less color variation and way too many details bogging it down. The cannonballs around the design are too small for the cannon on top of the head. The lack of a visible inside of the mouth doesn't work for a stone fortress versus that of a sandcastle. That shiny is also a 6-pack of ass. Texken Palisand, the Rock Fortress Pokemon. So, a lot of the design elements for this Pokemon would later be incorporated into Phantom in the eventual reboot. So this and Palastone are very different from one another if you compare them. That being said, this is way too busy once again, mainly thanks to the excess of cannonballs littering the design. The hallway arms are just terrible on this design. Mainly thanks to the perspective looking like ass. The eyes are too tiny, almost getting lost into the shuffle. The shiny is only moderately less terrible than Sandygast's. Splashild, the impatient Pokemon. This is in contention for being the worst Pokemon in the entire region, only rivaled by one later Pokemon towards the end. The fucking feet make me so angry looking at this Pokemon. They just don't work in the slightest. Body's too busy, the wings are too big, and I just noticed a tangent on the neck and torso. Joy! The lack of tail feathers just helps add to this Pokemon feeling empty. Get the fuck off my screen. Fish Heron, the Longcast Pokemon. Thankfully, the evolutions aren't nearly as bad as Splashild. The only major issues with this Pokemon is I didn't push the life jacket around its neck far enough and that the fishing lure wasn't big enough. The hat is also a little too high on the head. I could have pushed that further down. The feet positioning really doesn't let this thing have a good sense of balance, and unfortunately, the green on the shiny is just ugly. Moving on. Cranomite, the explosive fisher Pokemon. The biggest flaw with this bomb-happy psychopath is that the legs are too damn skinny. They don't feel strong enough to support this Pokemon's weight, or even hold the explosive reeds they clutch in their feet. I would say this is the stronger of the two evolutions design-wise in this version, if only because it has less overt flaws. Except for the shiny, that is an offense against good taste and Arceus. God, I was shit at making shinies in this version of the region. Leapfrog, the skittish Pokemon. This one isn't too bad, just needing better color contrast and proportions. The light brown accent doesn't stand out enough against the design. Granted, that was before I changed this stage to be a fairy type, so put an asterisk next to that particular criticism. The legs are too long and the head is too small. Those facts aren't up for debate, however. The eye also could have been a smidge bigger. That shiny isn't too bad, but the reboot just has a better one. Prong Alarm, the early warning Pokemon. If you thought I didn't have enough to say with Leapfrog, get ready since this one actually has some shit to discuss. The lower jaw looks so weird in this Pokemon, and it's just distracting to me. It looks so bad, I just had to take it off in the reboot. The legs lack a lot of definition, making them look like wet noodles more or less here. The horns look terrible, there was no saving those whatsoever. The color scheme isn't terrible, but it lacks a focal color and the pink feels overwhelming more than accommodating. I had my work cut out for me when I had to redesign this fucker. Jack Otter, the winter coat Pokemon. I love this little cutie, but it has some serious issues. For starters, the eyes and ears are too small and the upward foot lacks some much needed definition. I also could have pumped up the volume on the amount of fur on the jacket to really make the silhouette pop. Lastly, the scarf tail feels limp on the ground here. I really should have reposed that and changed some of the colors. More mid-shinies. Can I get one good shiny in this version of the region? Please! Thermal, the body temperature Pokemon. Outside of needing a longer neck and some reworked colors, this is actually fine in my book. I really didn't have to change a damn thing in this Pokemon in the reboot outside of what I just discussed previously. Overall, I am very happy with this Pokemon. The shiny is just okay if I'm being generous. Texken Cricketune, the cricket Pokemon. A few color changes here and there and some slightly bigger arms, and this Pokemon would have been perfect from the get-go. Sorry if this is boring. Outside of those issues and a bum-ass shiny, this is just a fine Pokemon. Removing one or two of the strings on the neck would have helped as well, but that's not entirely necessary. Cricketstrum, the guitar Pokemon. My biggest issue with this Pokemon can be boiled down to the legs. I just don't think they work here. It was a fun idea back then, but it doesn't add a whole lot on a second look, sadly. I think they take up too much space, and I have a hard time imagining this Pokemon in an actual game walking around with the player. Other than that, this is fine, and we finally have a good shiny. Lacetricity, the Spark Puppy Pokemon. This goodish boy is almost great as it is currently, with only a few proportion issues holding it back. The legs are a touch too skinny, and the back is too long, or is it just at the wrong angle? The tail is actually a bit too long as well now that I look at it. None of these are major issues, but they still exist, so I gotta talk about them. This is still a good boy, and one with a good shiny. Zombie, the Restless Spirit Pokemon. As fun as this pose is, it doesn't help with this design, sadly. The pupil is too small and is lacking the necessary emotion for a good dog Pokemon. The yellow skeleton tail is fun on paper, but it doesn't work in execution. The multiple bolts and tears across the body clutter the design a bit, so I should have cut down by more than a few. The lightning bolt claws are fun, but they look like crap, and the bent paw up front just looks broken. I still love this Pokemon, but it needed more time to cook. Sentinel, the Stealth Wing Pokemon. This one isn't too bad, mainly just lacking in perspective and depth with the wings and tail feathers. The eyebrows could have been bigger as well for a clearer silhouette, but the biggest issue outside of the lack of depth is the head. I don't think I made it big enough or separated it enough from the body for more visual clarity. This is definitely around the middle of the pack in terms of this region design-wise. We definitely covered worse so far. Gatorth, the Mud Lizard Pokemon. An almost perfect Pokemon, only needing slightly thicker legs and a more defined neck. Though, I did need to simplify the mud spray along the limbs by just a touch in hindsight. A bigger eye to make it a touch cuter would have been useful as well. Anyway, finally, more good shinies! Bog Gator, the Ambush Apex Pokemon. Again, almost perfect in this form. It just needed more definition on the mud covering the body, with a little bit less grass sticking out here and there. A more saturated green accent and a more defined underbelly would have made this Pokemon perfect. This shiny sadly isn't as good as its prevos, but it's still decent, even if I did have to change it in the reboot. Mornvian, the Widow Pokemon. Oh, you could have been done so much better. The purple is too muted, the dress is too plain, and the wings are too big. Plus, the face just needed more details to help express the unrelenting sadness. This is a good foundation, but I really undercooked this design back then. Another good shiny, praise be. Texken Dwebble, the Dirt Clump Pokemon. Legitimately, I have no issues with this design. One of the few perfect designs from the OG region here. I love how this came out. From the tired expression, the tiered dirt clump on the back, and the overall color scheme. The shiny does need a bit of work, but it's still serviceable. Texken Crustle, the Grassroot Pokemon. Outside of fixing the grass across the board, this is another damn near perfect design both in this version and in the reboot. The roots really help the silhouette be so much more memorable and unique compared to normal Crustle. Hell, this is one of the few shinies I didn't have to change in the reboot since it was already so peak. Definitely the best regional variant of the OG region here. Asnormus, the comic Pokemon. The best Pokemon in the OG region. So much so that it just needed a redraw and a better render in the reboot to become perfect. I have no notes whatsoever for this Pokemon. It is that good and easily the best evolution of the entire region. This might be my favorite Pokemon in this version of the region, now that I think about it. Staroptera, the Astrobat Pokemon. This sucks. No beating around the bush. This is just a bad design with a fun motif. The rocket ears are a fun idea that do not work in execution at all. The wings are too big and the star on the forehead is not centered whatsoever. That shiny is complete garbage. I'm not even going to try to defend it. Stargoyle, the astronaut Pokemon. The wings and the space helmet look like shit. The rest of the design is passable at best. The body is a bit too complicated with the gray puffy sections, making it a little too busy. This is a good idea on paper, but it just does not work that well in execution. No, this is basically a repeat of the last entry. They share a lot of issues. I'm sorry. Thank God for the redesign. That's all I'm going to say. Moonco, the lunar lizard Pokemon. Trash. Easily one of the worst designs in this region by a country mile. Outside of the basic-ass design concepts for this Pokemon, nothing works about it whatsoever. I hate this design. Easily in the top 10 worst. The proportions are shit, there is no real contrast in this pastel-ass color scheme, and the basic shapes of the body, mainly the tail, are boring. Oh, the redesign you got blows this design out of the fucking water with a hydrogen bomb. Snowmite, the snowball Pokemon. This is just unintentionally creepy, mainly thanks to the eyes. If you had shown this to me without prior knowledge, I would have told you this was a bug ice type, and that kind of sucks since that's not the vibe I wanted. The legs are definitely the major factor there. The details and texture on the snowball just kind of cluttered this version of the design, and the shiny isn't pushed far enough. Barely noticeable, honestly. Snowapede, the snowman Pokemon. If you told me this thing stole kids like Driftloot, I'd believe you with this version of the design. The face and the scarp hands just make this thing look like a giant creeper. The centipede-like body fails because of the angle and the perspective of the last sections completely screwing me over. The branch antlers just look awkward and don't add anything to this design. The shiny is mildly better, thankfully. This thing still belongs on a list. Larvantum, the spectral parasite Pokemon. Poor ass proportions hold this Pokemon back so much. The head is too small, the curve of the body is completely out of whack, and the ectoplasm on the legs is too damn tiny to be a focal point. Don't even get me started about the poor facial proportions. The eyes definitely need to be bigger and more expressive, even for a parasitic demon like this thing. Thankfully, this line actually has some good shinies. Vespector, the ghost wasp Pokemon. So basic bitch coded, it's insane. There is nothing really interesting about this design. The color scheme is passable, the proportions make sense, and the design isn't offensive, but it's boring. The render on the ectoplasm is terrible. Nothing salvageable there. Solid shiny, but that's it in terms of positives. I had my work cut out for me injecting some life into this thing. Pun intended. Hackation, the razor claw Pokemon. Outside of the legs being a bit too lopsided to be balanced properly, this is damn near a perfect design. The colors, the shapes, the personality, even if that could have been pushed a little further admittingly. They all come together to create one of the most successful designs I've ever done. Legit, only needed a redraw to fix the few mistakes and add some more depth to the design. Only the evolution was as good as this version here. Crustsaw, the Motor Claw Pokemon. Over-designed. Dear God, this is bad. The idea that this Pokemon is wearing the carapaces of other crab Pokemon, a la Leatherface wearing human skin, was fun, but it looks like shit. The chainsaws are too small and lacking any real depth perspective to make this feel intimidating. The eye shape and mouth are probably the most fun parts about this design, and even then I didn't keep the eye shape in the reboot. That shiny is an absolute goddamn travesty. Some clown school shit. The redesign was so needed. I did this boy dirty. Texken Mr. Mime, the distraction Pokemon. Aside from the nose being a touch too small, I think this is actually perfect. I have no major notes or criticisms whatsoever for this one. No. All of that goes to the evolution. Mr. Fine, the Balloon Clown Pokemon. This looks terrible. The line work sucks. The perspective on the upraised foot doesn't make a lick of sense. And this thing is just so overall creepy. Even more than a normal clown or regular Mr. Mime. The overall design is there, but this was just not it, Chief. I almost want to give this thing a mega. Taking a note of that. Squall Spike, the poison barf Pokemon. Boringa. Oh my god, this is so basic. Outside of the spikes, this could have been any bargain bin shark Pokemon. The colors are blasé, the proportions are boring, and this doesn't have anything special to make it stand out. I am so disappointed with myself on this one. Mantipeno, the Spicy Claw Pokemon. Aside from needing to make these sparks on top of the head and the claw stand out more, I think I nailed this Pokemon. I love everything about this design, so much so that I basically just redrew it and added more sparks when I was doing the Texken reboot. Easily in the top 5 Pokemon of this version of the region. Geisteon, the playful spirit Pokemon. To say that this was the worst OG version of one of my evolutions is a mastery of understatement. This Timu Flareon looking ass Pokemon is a complete failure on every level. This is the worst Pokemon in the entire region, only rivaled by a few unlucky competitors. Nothing looks good about this design. The basic body looks terrible, the ectoplasmic sections look like trash, and this has no pattern to break up the colors whatsoever. There is a reason I've had to redesign this Pokemon 3 times since I originally shat this abomination out for the first time. I fucking hate you, OG Geisteon. Stingeon, the toxic body Pokemon. Way better in comparison to OG Geisteon. This one only needed some better proportions to be less awful. This is a middle-of-the-pack evolution. There's nothing inherently awful with this, but I think I could have done something more interesting nowadays. The proportions are definitely the weakest part of the design, needing a proper neck and a more defined stomach and chest. Still, at least this one stands out and the shiny looks good. 6 out of 10, what pet with gloves on? Rekilo, the demolition Pokemon. This one was almost there, but poor proportions strike again with this hefty fossil boy. The legs and tail are too long and skinny. Again. The pupil doesn't convey enough emotion, which this Pokemon desperately needs. While tough, there are too many spikes on the back and it just clutters the design. Lastly, the helmet looks like shit. The perspective just doesn't work at all. The shiny is also just kinda mid. This is a good Pokemon at its core, it just needed a few more passes. Sludge Kilo, the Hammer Flail Pokemon. Second verse, same as the first, more or less. The full-on front view of the face was a massive mistake, making it look weird and not in a unique way. The colors are also way too muted, mainly with the orange and the light blue accents. The sledgehammer tail doesn't work with the cable in this position. The weight balancing just doesn't make any sense there. The toes are too small for a Pokemon this heavy. This overall just feels too skinny. This boy needs some more meat on his recently revived bones. The shiny is pretty good outside the dark blue accents, kind of clashing. A Crombo, the multi-strike Pokemon. Unfortunately, my short king here is too fat. It just doesn't fit the vibe of the Pokemon line, and the terrible line work doesn't help in that regard at all. The feet look like shit, the arms and eyes are too small, and the purple accents are too muted and just muddy the design as a result. The pink does not work for this shiny. It really clashes with the light blue skin, I feel in hindsight. A Crownter, the retaliation Pokemon. This feels way too human in the posing and proportions of the body, mainly in the legs. Sad legs are also way too busy with the complicated patterning and color scheme. The face also suffers from that just a smidge. The tail is too long and the yellow accent color just overcomplicates things. Should have ditched that in the final pass. God, do I hate this shiny so much. It's such an eyesore. Venadori, the poison slug Pokemon. Okay, home stretch. Let's do this. This one needed a stronger body plan and silhouette. The torso is too much of a blob, but the tail in particular needed to be a lot more defined. The fins are too small for this Pokemon, so much so that it doesn't look like it could even move under its own weight with them. The purple accents are too muted. Again. The patterns need to be a lot more simplified, mainly on the fins. Lastly, the ear needed to be thicker and put further back on the head, acting more like horns in a sense. The shiny was trash. No saving that one. Dracopod, poison slug Pokemon. This needed a more defined neck and back. Pushing the pose further would have really helped with that, since this pose is weak as fuck. Once again, the patterns needed to be heavily simplified since they are way too busy. The head is also a touch too big, and the eye doesn't stand out amongst the design enough. The fins should have been a lot wider with a clearer silhouette for each of them. I was trash at making shinies for so damn long. It's sad looking at them now. Glaucaustic, the slug dragon Pokemon. Too damn long. This thing needed to be cut and sized down by at least one section. The patterns on the back are, once again, too busy, both in shape and color this time around. The fin/wings are bent at an odd angle, and they don't give much in the way of implied movement or weight. The back fins look terrible, like I just stuck them to the side of the body with a stapler and called it a day. Once again, the eye gets lost in the shuffle. The perspective on the wing on our right makes no damn sense and is just a complete fumble on my designs. 3 for 3 on trash shinies. I am so sorry for this version of the line. Astropint, the guiding light Pokemon. This is one of the worst designed legendaries I have ever done. What the actual fuck is that color scheme? It looks like a clown orgy. The Lone Star theme is barely there, and you wouldn't even be able to tell that was the inspiration with this trash-ass color scheme and proportions. This has no aura, no presence, and is a terrible counterpart to Gullibus in this version of the region. That shiny is also a fucking disaster. I am ashamed to look at this Pokemon. Thank Arceus for the eventual redesign. Gullibus, the Star Eater Pokemon. Unlike its counterpart, this Pokemon's actually pretty damn good, even back then. This just needed another pass to make it perfect. I should have made the rocks in the jet stream a bit bigger for more visual clarity. I also needed to simplify the jaw shape a little bit. The eyes and the star patterns also need to be a touch bigger to stand out more. Some minor proportion changes aside, this was peak from jump. I should have changed the shiny a bit more, though, in hindsight. And with that, we are done. Like with the Sendine region, this entire thing was an assault to my eyes, and I am sorry for my lack of talent back then. Now it's only marginally less terrible. If you can stomach looking back on this video, what was your favorite design? I won't ask what your team is, as there are no abilities here whatsoever. If you'd be so kind as to like and subscribe, just looking at all of these mid-ass designs worth it for me. Click the bell to stay up to date for future videos. I upload almost every month. Next time, for the final video of the year, we head back to the Texken region one last time before the eventual reboot as we explore the frigid territories. This is Austin, signing out.